usually takes 13 minutes and 30 seconds, so Mike may throw me out the window. My name's Kannon Pearson. I'm a graduate student in the Tarpon Lab at UC Berkeley. Usually, I study chemical defenses and admixture in Pacific newts, genus Tarica. But today, I'm talking to you about something far more important, which is gay frogs. All right, like any good herpetologist, we have to start out with describing our study system. Ooh, a pointer. Oh, it's backwards. This is a frog. What are some features of frogs? Well, they're tetrapods, they're amphibians, they have slimy skin, and very important to me, they're sometimes toxic. But last and most important to me and to everyone else on the planet, frogs are gay. Now here's a little disclaimer. When I use gay and queer throughout this presentation, I'm using it in the umbrella way for all the LGBTQs pluses. Frogs get to be any flavor of gay. I'm not going to gatekeep frogs. But what do I mean by this? Well, three things. First off, frogs are incredibly popular as a meme in queer internet spaces. Second off, scientifically, they're a little fruity. And lastly, they have personal symbolism to me as a queer herpetologist, and I really like projecting my personal experiences on animals that can't speak for themselves. Let me provide some evidence for this first claim. So here's a small curated selection of memes about gay frogs. They are lovers. We're powerless to stop them. We have non-binary frog memes, relatable. Bisexual frog memes, I want the couch. People just posting on subreddits generally about their effervescent love of frogs. This one's my favorite. If you want to be my lover, you gotta like them frogs. That's true for a lot of herpetologists. And this has spawned its own genre of like meta-analysis posts and people wondering, why are they so popular? There's even a couple of popular like articles online about this. And so I compiled a few possible explanations. The first one, the hint is the shirt given to me by Mike Westphal, is Frog and Toad. All right, so Frog and Toad is a children's book series by author Arnold Lobel. Frog and Toad are besties. They go on bike rides, they bake cookies, they're very friendly and sweet to each other. To a lot of gay people reading these stories, they read very clearly as a couple of old queens living out their latter years in peace and solitude. And there's some evidence for this. Arnold Lobel himself was gay, and his daughter said that the writing of Frog and Toad, she felt, was part of his coming out process. My second explanation is a lot harder to explain, but I'll do my very best, and that is cottagecore. Cottagecore is a celebration of a collection of aesthetics. This arose during the pandemic. People were trapped inside, they were depressed, they were cooped up, so they started to celebrate things like nature and baking and cottages and simple rural lifestyles. And if you go on TikTok, the term cottagecore frog has 21.2 billion views because frogs usually show up in cottages, I don't know. And lesbians famously love cottages. I don't make the rules. And so there's a lovely little pipeline from lesbian to cottage to frog. All right, now the last explanation, and my personal favorite because it hits very close to home, is a little place called UC Berkeley. Specifically the work done by Professor Tyrone Hayes, professor in the Department of Integrative Biology. He studies endocrine disrupting chemicals and their effects on frog sexual development. And in 2010, Tyrone's lab released this paper where they exposed African clawed frogs to atrazine, a common herbicide. And they saw all sorts of intense effects on the frog's sexual morphology and behavior. And in the most extreme cases, about 10% of these frogs mated successfully with male frogs that had not been exposed to atrazine. And the atrazine-affected frogs laid eggs. So pretty profound change. Eventually, this research ended up on the desk of a very bad man, Alex Jones. For those of you who don't have the privilege of not knowing who this is, I'm going to take that away from you. He is a conservative conspiracy theorist and radio show host. He hates the government, he hates the gays, he's just not great. And in 2015, it took him a while, he released a famous segment where he sits behind his desk, he points his finger at the audience, and he says, "I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the frickin' frogs gay." He follows this up by saying that the federal government is dropping a gay bomb over the countryside to emasculate the American male, and finishes with the bold claim, the majority of frogs in the US are now gay. Which, is an impressive misinterpretation of Professor Hayes' research, specifically because the frogs were not gay at the end of the process, they were transgender. If you look at the Google search term popularity for gay frog, there is a pretty clear spike right after the release of Alex Jones' video, and I think this is strongly indicative of the atrazine research being the ultimate origin of the popularity of the gay frog concept, and ultimately, frog memes for queer people. But the public response to the atrazine research didn't just come in the form of entertaining memes. So in addition to reasonable concerns about public health and environmental justice, the response of the public revealed some really deeply held discomfort with creatures that don't fit into binary sexual categories. So on this next slide, I'm going to show you a selection of terms used in the media to describe the atrazine-affected frogs. All right, so not a pretty picture. These are words that many queer folks are pretty familiar with being levied against them by friends, family, bullies, historically. And it might be easy to dismiss this kind of language as just originating from people like Alex Jones, but that, unfortunately, is also not the case. On this next slide, I've highlighted words used verbatim by scientists to describe the frogs that were affected by atrazine. Now, I don't think any of these scientists are necessarily bigots at all, but I do think this is highly reflective of a scientific system that arises from a culture that doesn't really like queer people and doesn't really like creatures that don't fit into our neat little categories of sexual behavior and sexual morphology. And this isn't just a problem with the atrazine research. This has historically been the kind of language used to describe animals like this as inferior, even ones that show up in nature. And this kind of language implicitly slanders folks who share analogous traits to these animals. As scientists, we have the responsibility to be aware of the biases of the culture that we operate within. We're not objective. And also to be careful that we don't perpetuate the bullshit that the culture is feeding us. I think this is additionally acute because there's literature showing natural sexual diversity, just in the wild, homosexual behavior, intersex individuals, etc. And in some cases, this has been shown to be adaptive. So, the framing of this language is also just kind of inherently negative. It doesn't mean to be. All right, the takeaway from this first part of the talk. Herpetological research may have powerfully shaped queer internet culture. Good job. And in general, you can't predict how your research might interact with broader society, but you are absolutely responsible for the language you use in popularizing it and in publishing about it. All right, quick little pivot to me. Gonna talk about what gay frogs mean to me as a queer herpetologist. Starting graduate school and becoming a herpetologist roughly coincided with my own personal queer awakening, and my advisor, Becca, can attest that the Kannon who first showed up for grad school did not look like this. I wore a button-up shirt every day and freshly ironed slacks. No longer. But when I arrived, I quickly realized that herpetology classically celebrates a particular flavor of rugged, adventuresome masculinity. And these aren't inherently bad traits. I love a lot of herpetologists who are like this, shout out Jim McGuire. But I very quickly realized that this was the norm. And when I was undergoing my own kind of queer exploration with presentation, I felt acutely self-conscious because I still wanted to be taken seriously in these spaces. The field is a whole other issue. Honestly, most of the time, I am the straightest cis boy alive in the field. It's often not safe to be anything else. Nevertheless, I still found community and support in herpetology and natural history. And furthermore, frogs and studying amphibians has kind of a really lovely symbolism to me in my own personal life. So this is a concept first brought up to me by my partner, Avi Berger, in the audience, a PhD student at UIUC, which is that the process of metamorphosis in many amphibians is analogous to the queer experience. You know, amphibians often start off as sad little eggs, then they become tadpoles, and they undergo a brief, intense, and vulnerable period of metamorphosis, and then they live the rest of their lives as a beautiful little froggy. And for queer people in particular, our life is often broken up into these periods of stability interrupted by periods of really intense change. So before, during, and after coming out. Before, during, after a medical or social transition. Losing friends, gaining family, missing people, finding yourself. And like in amphibians, this is a very delicate time of metamorphosis, and there are queer people who don't make it to the other side. And furthermore, like amphibians, just as different species have different endpoints, different queer people have different endpoints to their own queer journeys. I think this concept is really beautifully encapsulated by this song by Ezra Furman, a transgender singer, in her song Body Was Made. She sings, "My body was made this particular way, recurrent desire, never totally tamed. And honey, I've tried and tried to explain it away, but my body was made. My body was made with this attribute too, the need to become something totally new. Mysterious forces that don't involve you. Body was made." Now, I think this could be sung by a tadpole and feel equally realistic. All right, we love action. We're herpetologists. What do we need to do? Well, maybe as a result of the popularity of frogs amongst gay people, there will be a surge in queer herpetologists. I don't really know. I think we could still do better for the queer folks who are already here. This comes in a few forms. Allyship and welcoming, always good. A little bit can go a long way. Something I really loved at JMIH in 2022 is they put these little pride flag stickers that you could put on your name tag. And when I walked out amongst the people attending that conference, I had a really acute realization that I was not as alone as I thought I was being a queer person there. So, good shit. We need to be aware and thoughtful of the potential impact of our research on popular culture. We need to re-examine the language we use to describe aberrance in biology and what we consider aberrance. And yeah, just like be normal. Okay, if you want to hear about my thesis related research, please stop by the poster of the best undergrad in the world, Natalie Meyer, talking about the newt toxicity and development. And thank you for listening. Here's my reading list. I am compiling a longer one. If you want the longer one, please email me after the conference. Here's my Instagram. Shout out to Rika if you want to send me gay frogs memes. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Okay, anyone have any questions? Yeah, Kiwi.
On a scale of 1 to 10, gay frogs.
11. Yeah, towards the back.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, much appreciated. I was very happy to be able to give this talk. I gave it last year at my departmental seminar, and my advisor was like, "You really got to talk to more people about this." So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed the memes. Yeah.
Do you see more space for this kind of similar interdisciplinary critique within the field, this kind of meta critique? This is just like something that I've been thinking about and something that's really fantastic. So I was wondering if this is something that you can see more people taking on, more critiques at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of space for that sort of thing. One of the discussions I've been seeing recently that relates to this is field safety and how we prepare for going out into the field, how we make sure our grad students and our undergrads stay safe out there. And that kind of overlaps a lot with this conversation. I would say additionally, if you read outside of just like the biology releases, there are feminist scholars studying biologists. And the reading list I have here is 3 really good examples of this. Just excellent, excellent work. And I think if more of us paid more attention to like what people who study the system of science are saying to us scientists, we would benefit as a field. All right, thanks again.